Welcome to the first Sunday in Lent. It's fantastic to be able to speak to you today and look out and see familiar faces everywhere, including our guests who are actually familiar faces to me from years ago, and I appreciate them being here. Thank you for joining us for what is the beginning of the Lenten season. Last Wednesday, as you know, February 14th, was both Ash Wednesday and Valentine's Day. And I got to wondering, how frequently does that happen? And I checked my phone when I want to know the answer to a question like that, and apparently it happened in 2018, which I've forgotten about. I think, COVID adjusted our memory so we don't remember anything before 2020, or at least it's difficult to do that. And then apparently it's going to happen again in 2029. So if whatever you did last Wednesday worked for you, you'll get a chance to do it again 5 years from now. And the unique thing about that day was that it provided an opportunity to combine two types of love, eros and agape. And the subject of eros for me is this beautiful lady sitting in the front row. And then the agape experience, I think, is this fellowship of this church that we are starting and trying to build together. It's embracing what God has done for us sacrificially and then trying to share that amongst each other and outward in the wilderness. So our lectionary verses today that come from the New Testament is going to be the first Bible reference that we have. So if you have your Bible and you want to turn to the beginning of Mark, that's really where we're going to start. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've got a lot of words to say. And I hope I actually say a lot in the process, because those two things often are not the same thing. And so you'll be able to determine that for yourself. But if you've turned to Mark, this will be our launching gospel message. Mark is the shortest Bible book in the Bible, and it's often the one that new Christian believers are directed to because it has 16 chapters, and it's pretty pithy in its message but robust in its content. And so the beginning of Mark, and the lectionary verse, which I think was covered in Bible study this morning, is Mark 1, 9 through 15. I'm just going to read verses 12 and 13 for you as we get started so we can just jump right in. The words are on the screen as well. Verse 12, the Spirit then compelled Jesus to go into the wilderness, where he was tempted by Satan for 40 days. He was out among the wild animals, and the angels took care of him. So let's just fact check real quick. So where did Jesus go? Into the wilderness. And I think at that time, wilderness just meant remote area where he could be by himself, away from the city center, and a chance for him to pray and fast and be with God. And how long was he there? For 40 days. And that number is symbolic in lots of other parts of the Bible. You may recall the 40 years that the Israelites wandered from the time they left Egypt to the time they actually begun to enter Canaan, the Promised Land. And there are other references to that number. And then what happened to him while he was there? He was tempted by the evil one. And Mark doesn't go into details about the source of that temptation. Matthew does, and Luke does. And I've heard some powerful sermons from pastors who just focus on those types of temptations that Jesus experienced in the wilderness. I can summarize them real quick for you, although you probably know what they are. The first one had to do with the devil telling Jesus, if you do this for me, I'll give you some food, because he was hungry. And that didn't work, primarily because that would have defeated the purpose of the fasting, but Jesus could have called down manna from heaven anytime he wanted to if satisfying his hunger was of utmost priority to him, but it wasn't. The second temptation was, if you bow down before me, I'll give you all this earthly treasure. Well, did that work for Jesus? Absolutely not. He wasn't interested in earthly treasure. He told his disciples when he sent them out, take one staff and one coat and one pair of sandals and then go on your merry way. God was not enthralled by riches, and neither was his son while he was here on earth. But that third temptation has a different flavor to it. And if you remember that one, that's the one where they were at the top of the mountain. And the devil basically said, if you are who you say you are, throw yourself off, and I'm sure the angels will keep you from hurting yourself. Now, that wasn't a do this and you'll get something, do this other thing and you'll get something. Those were more like bribes. And why does the devil use bribes? Because they work. That's why you hear news reports of politicians with cash in their mattresses or gold bars in their boudreaux at home, because bribing people works, because we as humans give in to that, yeah, I'll do this if I get something in return. But that other temptation is the one that we're going to talk about today. The flavor of that one was different. It was more along the lines of, Well, if you're not guilty, prove it. Or, if you really love me, you'll let me, ... It was a conniving, psychologically reversal switch of the person who's responsible and the person who's supposed to have responsibility. And that strategy didn't work on Jesus, but that same strategy is prevalent today, and it works in a lot of ways. And it undermines who we are as Christians. It undermines our families. And we're going to talk about that. While you're thinking about how you might recognize that in society or in life or in your own wilderness, let me tell you a personal story, a little anecdote real quick while you're thinking. Most of you know that I've been a professional educator for 30 years, and I started my teaching career at a high school that's sort of in that direction, about 5 miles from here, and I taught there for 13 years, which is the time it takes a kid to go from kindergarten to graduation, and I also coached the golf team. And as a young teacher, I needed extra money during the summer, so sometimes I would teach summer school. But in the summer of 1997, after having done summer school the year before, which was the year of the Olympics, and being really tired, I decided not to teach in summer school, but I decided to get a job. And the job I got was being a caddy at a swanky golf course in Alpharetta. So I spent the summer caddying. Now, when you look on TV and you watch golf tournaments, what you see is a caddy carrying a bag on their shoulder, helping one player. That was not the model at this course. At this course, the players rode in carts, usually in a foursome, and so one caddy would ride on the back of one cart and then serve those two players, and the other caddy would ride on the second cart. So 4 players, 2 caddies, and you took care of 2 people at one time. Same caddy stuff, right? Yardage, direction, cleaning off the clubs, handing them the putter and the driver and all that kind of stuff. And one day, when I was caddying, I got the holy grail that caddies want, and that is a threesome, 3 players. And if you're lucky, you're the caddy that gets assigned to the cart that only has 1 player, which really can be a double-edged sword, because it's good that you don't have to serve 2 players. You can focus on 1 player, you can make sure they have the right club and the right yardage and have what they need. The disadvantage is there's only 1 wallet that your tip is going to come out of instead of 2 wallets. But I lucked out because I had learned to look at the shoes and the watch. And the gentleman that I got assigned to that day had really expensive shoes and a really expensive watch. And nice shoes plus nice watch equals tip potential. So I was motivated to serve this player this day in high fashion. Halfway through the round, we got to a par 4 with a swamp on the left and woods on the right that I knew very well. My player was up first, and he hit it, and it faded into the woods. So I looked at my caddy partner, my colleague, and I winked at him, and I took off running down the woods before the other 2 players had hit. Because on that particular hole, there was a path through the woods because there were houses on the other side of the woods, and I knew how to navigate that without being seen from the tee. And I wanted to get to where the ball was to have time to find it before we actually rode on the carts to get there. So I took off, made my way down. I got about 230 or so yards and started looking for the ball. And growing up without a lot of money, you learn to be able to find stuff, or you can't, or the game ends, right? And you can't keep playing. So I found this player's ball under a bush and behind a big pine tree. There was no way he could even get to the ball, much less be able to actually hit it and be productive. So I did what you might have seen in a James Bond movie. I reached in and I grabbed the ball and I cleaned it off, and I took 6 steps to the right to where I found an opening in the trees. I could see the green. I put the ball down on a tuft of pine straw, and I made sure the word Titleist was lined up straight towards the opening. I took my white towel, I went out to the fairway, and I waved like, "It's a miracle," with a little M. I found your ball. And I helped my player come over, and he's like, "Goodness, what a great fortune. I actually have a shot to the green." And I thought to myself, yes, you do, and I hope you hit a good shot. Now, you might think, what was motivating me to move that golf ball? And I could say, well, it would have taken a lot of time. The round goes faster if you play when you're ready. My player would have been frustrated and might have hit a bad shot because of this misfortune. Oh, and by the way, you were working on that tip as well. And you probably would have been right. But it was a recreational round, not a competitive round. And in golf, when you're playing a recreational round for fun, players often, give each other short putts and let have a mulligan if needed and things like that. But when you're playing a competitive round, like a club championship or the kind of golf that you see on television, the strict rules of golf are in play. You can't do those kinds of things. And had I done that during a competitive round, my player would have been disqualified, I would have been fired, and then I would have had a reputation as a cheater. Could have and should have been severe consequences for breaking the rules when the strict rules are in play. And that's the way that the world works now, right? When people break the rules, the strict consequences are in play, or at least they should be in play. So we're going to make a connection between Jesus' temptation in the wilderness and the strategy that the devil used that didn't work, and how that same strategy is used on us today in our own personal wildernesses, and how we feel about whether the rules should be in play or not in play along the way. So let's talk about the wildernesses that you may experience. Sometimes we go out in remote areas. I do that when I go hunting. But as we live our daily life, let me describe a few wildernesses that you might spend time in. One of them might be based on geography. Where you live, where you go to work, the grocery store that you shop at, that might be a wilderness for you because that's where you spend time. That might be a source of temptation. Exhibiting anger when you're driving in the car and somebody cut you off, or just in the checkout line of the grocery store. It's challenging times, and people have a lot of emotion right now, and it's a source of temptation for all of us. So your personal wilderness might be where your body is on any given day and the temptations that result. Another wilderness for you might be, I hate to say it, social media. I have a Twitter account, so I'm not anti-social media, but a lot of people spend their life with probably more time than they originally planned when they picked up their phone, doing things and interacting with their digital self, and with friends that are not in front of them. And I have a remote job. I stare at my screen several hours of the day because of my job. So it's not a matter of right or wrong. It's just a matter of that's where you spend your time. So that probably is a source of temptation at times for you. Another wilderness for you might be just your own mind. Sometimes we just have thoughts we can't get rid of. We have relationships that need mending that aren't. We have people that offended us at Thanksgiving dinner and we won't see them again for a year, so we have a year to stew on them. We have all kinds of things that are in our mind that we can't let go of that can become a wilderness that we spend time in, and again, can be a source of temptation for us. And the last one I'll mention, and there's probably many more, but the last one I'll mention is our past, who we were before. You know, new Christians, if you've had a chance to walk alongside a new Christian, struggle sometimes because the person they were before they became a Christian is all they know. They become a Christian and they try to live this Christian life, and it's hard. It's hard for a new Christian to sort of even understand what they're supposed to do, much less sort of do it effectively. And often they end up relying on the person they were before. Well, we do that too as existing Christians, because what we're supposed to do is be a better Christian tomorrow than we were today. So our past self is yesterday and the day before and the day before and the day before, and sometimes we just get caught up and live in the past, and that too can be a source, an area ripe for the devil to attack us and to present temptations. And there's probably other wildernesses that we could articulate, but I'll stop there just to illustrate to you that even though 2,000 years ago Jesus went in sort of a seclusion for his experience for 40 days, and we are experiencing that now 2,000 years later, and trying to remember that and identify and be able to match the sacrifice in some way so that we understand the significance of that moment, we still are in the wilderness in many areas of our life today that could be a source of temptation. And the devil is not a stupid creature. In fact, we often get attacked in our personal area of weakness over and over and over. And we're going to talk about 3 specific examples from 2024 where the devil uses that strategy he tried on Jesus. Well, if you say who you are, then you prove it, because that's not really the way it's supposed to work. But that's the way that people try to make it work for us. If you still have your Bible, we're going to go to a different part of the New Testament. We're going to look at Galatians chapter 2. Verse 11 is the beginning of what I'm about to read. And in this part of Galatians, Paul, who was not a disciple but an apostle, holds Peter, who was a disciple, and not just any disciple, but the rock on which Jesus built the church. Paul holds Peter to account for the way that Peter was interacting with or stopped interacting with Gentiles who were not Jewish. So let's read starting in verse 12. When Peter came to Antioch, I had to oppose him to his face, for what he did was very wrong. When he first arrived, he ate with the Gentile Christians who were not circumcised. But afterwards, when some friends of James came, Peter wouldn't eat with the Gentiles anymore. He was afraid of criticism from these people who insisted on the necessity of circumcision. As a result, other Jewish Christians followed Peter's hypocrisy, and even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. So let me summarize that. Paul went to his Christian brother and said, "You're not doing it the right way. You were doing it and then you stopped doing it, and that's wrong. That was the wrong reason." He was criticizing his fellow believer and follower of Jesus. And what happens when we do that today? When we try to hold somebody that we love accountable for a misdeed or a misword or a missed opportunity, they don't like it. And this is people that we have a relationship with. What happens when you do that to a perfect stranger? When you say, you're parked in a handicapped spot and you're not handicapped, don't do that. Or stop cussing around little kids, or whatever you might see in your wilderness. What do those people do? Do they say, "Oh, thank you for pointing out the error of my ways. I appreciate you holding me accountable for moral standards of behavior and ethical considerations"? No, they lash out. And often they claim something about your identity and their identity. You're picking on me because I'm short. You don't like people with green eyes. You're a racist. You're a sexist. You're whatever. And this is what happens in the year 2024 when accountability, which is what we should all do for each other for the good of the body of Christ, people don't like being held accountable. They don't like their wrongness, whether it's sin or not, or just violation of the speed limit, being pointed out to them, and they turn around and they don't go on the defensive. They go on the attack and make your identity, whoever your demographic categories, the problem for them. They're distracting their behavior and trying to foist on you wrongness in the process. And what's the temptation for us? Well, the temptation would be just like if Jesus had jumped off the mountain. The temptation for us is to get in the argument to begin with and then begin denying, "I'm not racist," or "I'm not sexist," or change our behavior because then we're being attacked by people who were actually the ones in the wrong to begin with. That doesn't mean that we're not sinners, but it does mean that we all have a responsibility to hold everybody else in society accountable for following the rules and not moving the golf ball if it's the club championship, because you're supposed to be playing by the strict rules of golf in that setting. So that's one way that strategy is used. And if you think about it, is it really the people doing that, or might it be the devil working through the lives of people doing that? I mean, God uses everybody's good deeds and bad deeds for his own purpose. The devil doesn't use people's good deeds because they don't accomplish his purpose. He just uses the bad deeds. And when people treat you that way, and people call you stuff, and when people distract from their own misdeeds and then make the issue about who you are or how much hair you have or don't have on your head or what your accent is or what kind of car you drive, then that is the source of the devil's work, not God's work. Let me give you a second example, and this one's a big one, and I'm going to say it straight into the microphone. But first, let's look at the Bible passage. This comes from Matthew 18, because if we can't underlie what we're talking about with the Bible, then maybe we need to consider what we're about to say. Matthew 18. We'll read verses 5 and 6. Now, this is just after the disciples were arguing about which one of them was like the chief disciple, right? And we already saw later on that Paul had to rebuke one of them for, deciding, being criticized. And he caved to criticism instead of doing what he started doing to begin with, which is correct. Verse 5 and then 6 in Matthew 18. "And anyone who welcomes a little child like this on my behalf is welcoming me." This is just children, innocent, youth. "But if you cause one of these little ones who trusts in me to fall into sin, it would be better for you to have a large millstone," think concrete block, "tied around your neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea." Think about the power of that sentence that came out of the mouth of Jesus. If you harm these innocent little children who are looking for the guidance and the protection of every adult that they encounter because they're children and they respect adults because they're adults, then it'd be better off for you to just drown to death. A second area where the world or whatever wilderness you spend your time in, which is probably a combination of the ones I mentioned and others. The world is using that strategy right now, and it is all around. And that strategy, the one that the devil tried to use to Jesus about prove that you're not, I'm going to accuse you of being this, and then you have to prove you're not. The false accusations and false compulsions. That's being used in so many disastrous ways, including for children, including the reason that we're all sitting here in a global Methodist church today and not in a UMC that we came from. This whole idea of sexual identity, and I'm born a girl but I can be a boy, all of that stuff is evil, all of it. We're sitting in a school having this worship service. This school is part of a school district. The school district of which this school is a part this past week, on Wednesday, released a parent engagement survey. We want you to answer questions about your child's experiences at school. And they announced it with a picture, and the picture had a family. A 10-year-old little boy smiling. It was a staged picture, of course. On the bed, on the left was his mom, presumably. It's sort of, implied that it's his mom. And then on the right of the picture was his other mom. So on Ash Wednesday, last week, the school district that owns the school in which we're worshiping somebody thought, we want to represent family. And we'll do that with a child and two mamas in the picture. Is that the biblical definition of marriage? The biblical definition of marriage is husband, wife, Christian home, raise your Christian children, teach them the ways and they will not wander from it, and love and honor God. That's the Christian marriage. That's the Judeo-Christian marriage. That is under attack in so many ways, beyond just the direction of the United Methodist Church and this faux nature of inclusion. The Christian nuclear family is under attack in so many ways that I need to explain one or two of them to you, because the more research I've done, the shocked I am, and then you realize it's all around you. In the 1980s, some academic researchers, three ladies who built on each other's work in a serial fashion, developed this theory which is now known as queer theory. Now, you look up the word queer in the dictionary, and it had a general definition, right? Odd, non-typical, something that's unusual, not the norm. That's what the word queer means, generally speaking. But as is the case so often with words like violence and safety and things like that, the word has been misappropriated and weaponized against Christians and the Christian lifestyle. That term is now a field of research itself. And the idea is this, and you can look up the research. The nuclear family is husband, wife, children. Any deviation from that, whether the deviation is like the picture, two mamas, if the deviation is homosexuality, if the deviation is I want to have kids and not be married, if the deviation is I want to have kids with a bunch of people and marry all of them at the same time, whatever the deviation is, it's queer as in unusual. And then if all the people who didn't want to fit into God's definition of family got together, they could outnumber the people that did, and maybe we could just blow up the whole system and there won't be any rules, and then we can do whatever we wanted to do, and then everybody will do what's right in their own eyes. That's the strategy that is in play right now in this particular field and others, related fields. And what did Jesus say about damaging children, harming children, innocent children? I won't even talk about surgeries and change operations and all the stuff that is going on. I'll just talk back to what did Jesus say? If you harm a child, then it would be better for you to drown to death. Jesus was not advocating violence. He was advocating biblical justice against people who go against God's rules for living. People who just blatantly move the golf ball in the middle of the tournament and dare somebody to say something about it. And it's going on all over the place. It's going on in the very building that we worship in. If you look on the Planned Parenthood website right now, because I did yesterday, there's a whole section on Planned Parenthood website about how parents can talk to their preschool children about their gender identity and confusion that they may be experiencing. Now, preschool means I haven't gone to school yet. Well, how old are kids if they haven't gone to school yet? 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe 5, right? Because if you're 6, you have to at least be in first grade. Do 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds have confusion about lots of stuff? Like whether the chocolate chip cookie was really like a snickerdoodle? I mean, my own personal children, when my daughter was 8 or 9, she really thought she was a Disney princess. She had the dress and the makeup and the tiara and the wand, and she's casting spells. My sons, Monday they think they're Spider-Man, and by Friday they think they're a Power Ranger. But yet Planned Parenthood and similar organizations think that a 4-year-old is capable of making a decision or expressing an opinion, and then we as the parents just go along with it. Like Peter just went along and stopped eating with the Gentiles because of some criticism. This is dangerous. It's all around us. It's ubiquitous, and it's evil. There's some people that I care deeply about that I've worked with in my professional career who their online name, they feel the need to have their name and then to put a parenthetical statement after their name telling me if I'm going to refer to them in the third person whether I need to use a he or a she. Well, it's pretty obvious, right? If you're a girl, then you're a she, and then if you're a boy, you're a he, right? The boxes get checked when you're born at the hospital, and there's only 2 boxes. You can tell I'm a he, I'm a man. See, I have an Adam's apple right here. My wife is right here. We are married with 3 children. I'm the husband and the father. She's the wife and the mother. We're trying, although the sinners that we all are, we're trying to follow God's definition of marriage. I don't have to tell you I'm a he. I can't be a they because I don't have a twin, right? I was born alone. I don't have a twin brother or sister, so there is no they. I'm a he. I don't have to announce it to the world. You can tell. If I put on a kilt, because I do have some Scottish in my ancestry, I'm still a he with a kilt, right? It just might look like a dress, but I'm still a he. All of that nonsense is becoming accepted. A lot of people are being convinced, are being tricked, are being tempted to jump off whatever mountain is in their wilderness because they don't want to face criticism. And I felt it, and you probably have felt it too. And my message is, don't let that work. Don't play that game. Because the best way to win the game is not to play, which is a line from War Games. All right, I'll move to the third one, and then I'll tell you the point of our message today. Our third one, I have a Bible verse, but I also have a quote from Thomas Jefferson. The guy who has statues of himself being pulled down in various places across the country because some people think he did more bad than good, one of the founding fathers of our country. That Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson said, "The government that we elect is the government we deserve." In other words, if you vote for morons, don't be mad that morons win elections. Now, let me tell you what I'm not saying. What I'm not saying is that we should detach from the political process. I think Christians should vote in every election that you're eligible to vote in, and not only should you vote your conscience, you should vote your Christian conscience, because somebody's going to be mayor of Lawrenceville. And we might as well have somebody that most reflects the values that are important to us as individuals, as a family, and as a body of believers. Somebody's going to be the governor of Georgia. Somebody's going to be in all these political positions, and there's nothing wrong with supporting them. But what we often do when we jump off the mountain and we listen is we put expectations on politicians to solve problems that we should be solving ourselves. We put our faith and our trust in men and women as human individuals, and that faith and trust should be directed to God. This is leap year, so at the end of this month that we're in, there's going to be a 29th day. And it used to be really easy to know when the UMC General Conference was, because it was always the years with a leap day, and the presidential election. So there's a presidential election in November of this calendar year, right? No, first Tuesday in November. And somebody's going to win and somebody's not going to win. And there's going to be a whole lot of energy consumed and money spent on whoever wins, right? And we should care about that to the degree that we are engaged citizens. But the faith doesn't need to get put in the person. Even if our person wins, that we voted for, our candidate wins, the work is still up to us to solve the problems. That person can only do so much. And they may or may not be appointed by God. God will use them in one way or the other. But the third fallacy, the third strategy that the devil tries to use is to get us to subsume our responsibility and then concede that to some person with some name who we see on TV that may or may not be telling the truth to begin with. Ephesians 5:6 talks about this. Ephesians 5:6. Don't be fooled by those who try to excuse these sins. And those sins in previous verses are things like dishonesty, sexual immorality, greed, like politicians who just take money for votes and stuff like that. For the anger of God will fall on all who disobey him. I'm not against politicians, although I don't know why anybody would want to be president of a homeowners association. I still haven't figured that one out. But we need people in these positions because it's the way that our government is supposed to function. It's the way we're structured as a society. But I don't want us to put our faith in individual people. Our faith should be put into God, because people are always going to let us down, and God never will. So the devil tried this strategy on Jesus 2,000 years ago, and it didn't work. And he's trying the same strategy in different points and times in our lives, in whatever wilderness we find ourselves in, whether it's our identity as a person, whether it's the sexual identity of those around us, or whether it's people with name recognition and commercials on the television. And so what do we do? Well, the answer to that is also in Ephesians. Ephesians 4 talks about, as a body of believers, how do we respond when things are going awry? Starting in verse 14. We will no longer be immature like children. We won't be tossed and blown about by every wind of new teaching. And there's a lot of new teaching going out in our wildernesses. How much stuff that you see on social media do you think is true and factually correct? Like 10%? We will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever that they sound like the truth. You watch any political debate on any channel with any type of candidates from any political party, and most of what comes out of the mouth of most people is just not true, right? It's words that they're using because they're trying to get elected, promises that they're making that they probably will not keep. And that's just the reality of our system. Instead, this is verse 15, instead, we will speak the truth in love. So what are we as Christians supposed to do now that I've given you the reality of what happens in the wilderness, whether your wilderness is where you are physically, where you are in terms of your digital presence, your own mind, or your past? What are we to do? Are we supposed to cave in to criticism like Peter did? And I'm not criticizing Peter. I'm using a moment from his life as a learning experience, because we all cave in at different times, right, to sin and temptation in various ways. But what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to tell the truth in love. We're not supposed to say, well, okay, everybody's doing it, so I guess it's okay. All the caddies are moving the ball in the club championships. I'm going to move the ball too. Right is right and wrong is wrong, and it doesn't matter how many people are doing each one. And most of what's on either side of the line is addressed in the Bible 2,000 years ago. It might look different in 2024. It might look different in 2029, the next time we have Ash Wednesday and Valentine's on the same day. But the whole point of my message is to tell you what I've decided I'm going to give up for Lent. In thinking about all this stuff, it can create some anxiety. It can create some, oh my goodness, what is going on? The world is, what is the world coming to? It can create apprehension. It can create anger. It can create bitterness. It can create resentment. It can make us feel defeated. And psychologists would take all of those and say, what root of the inside of your psyche do all those attach to? And it's a 4-letter word that starts with F. It's fear. So guess what I'm going to give up for Lent? I'm going to try really hard for the next 34 days to give up. I'm just going to give up being scared about it, worried about it. The Bible says don't worry about tomorrow. And this is included in the tomorrows. I encourage you to give up whatever is scaring or worrying or provoking anxiety or causing you, any negative feelings or connotations, or the slippery slope down which you think about something and then 10 minutes later you're boiling mad. Give up all of that. Don't worry about it. Why can I just say it so plainly? Because we're in a battle, a spiritual battle, but we already know who wins. Because 6 Sundays from now, on Ascension Sunday, the winner is raised from the dead and is sitting at the right hand of the Father in heaven. We know how the war ends, and we end up victorious. And what's going to happen is, if we change the standard, if we try to change the rules for living, if we say that's okay even when we know that's wrong, that will trickle down and it'll hurt children. Maybe not our blood children, but somebody's blood. And Jesus said, don't do that. Don't hurt the children. I encourage you, through whatever your Lenten commitments are, to think about the wildernesses in which you live and how you can be bold and courageous and speak truth. Do it in love. Don't go grabbing concrete bricks and throwing people in the ocean. But the truth is the truth, even if nobody's speaking it. And sin is sin, even if everybody's willing to do it. Amen. In the name of the Father and the Son. Thank you so much.